this is Chipicon, and welcome to Otherworldly, the Changing Times, Changing Worlds talk show, as it were. We have one of our favorite speakers tonight, which is Jane Sibley, Jane and I started Changing Times, Changing Worlds. So hail, the gang's all here. And as usual, Jane is doing her tell you everything magical about the ancient Norse stuff.
Yeah.
This time, she's going to be talking about the veterinary medicine, because let's face it, if your animals were not healthy, then you were going to be stuck, chewing on plants. Plants are slow, but sometimes you just it's easier to get the calories in and the protein with animals. So you want to keep your animals healthy.
Got to have contented cows. And
also you have, the techniques, many of them are very similar. Dosages would probably be different on a cow than on one of your kids. But so where is Jane? There is Jane.
I'm
Jane.
right here.
Jane.
So
hi, everybody.
Hi, Jane.
Hi.
Hello.
Yo. Well, I guess I should start yapping.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's why everybody came.
Yeah, all right. Well, a lot of the veterinary medicine was folklore, and there's a lot of the documented is Christian in nature, but you can see where stuff would be sort of retreaded from the pagan. And this is material from, say, Viking times into the 1800s. I'm not going to read the Norwegian. I do have the Norwegian. There's a black screen here. And so one of them was, I'm driving in nails, I'm driving in steel, I'm driving out all bad, which flies between heaven and earth. And that was from a spell in 1925 where you drove nails into the threshold of the cow buyer. And so you would, because, with the steel, you see steel a lot, or metals a lot in Norse magic. I've got a class that I submitted for Changing Times, Changing Worlds on metals in Norse lore. I don't know whether that can accept it or not. We'll find out. Now, the Norse also were very legalistic. In other words, they tried to cover all aspects, whether it was creeping, flying, crawling, swimming, etc., etc. So here's a spell from 1780. I shall protect my animals and horses from all fiends and the devil, from man and woman, and for all the magic which creeps between heaven and earth and flies in the air. And it shall shy away from my animals and horses and not disturb them any more than they would with Jesus' own head hair, in the names of the God Father, God Son, and God the Holy Spirit. I'm not going to read the Norwegian. And so, they really tried to legalistically, and they would say, this is like a doing for. To drive away bad luck, you wanted to have your animals safe. Now, the most important animals obviously were cattle and horses and sheep and goats. Dogs and cats came way down on the scale because there were always more of them. But anyway, to drive away bad luck on one's farm, this spell goes from 1800. Go to 3 district churchyards and take a bit of earth from each graveyard. And for as much as you would take from each churchyard, you will replace that with other earth. See, this is called borrowing. So you would put some in whatever you take. The earth you take, you shall strew on that which you own, and give your animals some to ingest, and the remains are to be cast onto the fire. Then you and all of yours will be watched over by God. So you see here you have, and we find the borrowing also in other aspects of Norse lore. And so, yeah, pigs also are important. Magical diseases inflicted by supernatural spirits. The Vanneven, or the Tusa, which were not exactly like gnomes, but they were supernatural beings that were in the world of humans. Surely they would be causing the problem by biting the animal. So a healer that could do for this, would notice that the hair falls off a bite spot. So there are various people that were famous for doing for. If an animal gets sick in a very short period of time, you say, oh, it got the tusse, and the best advice, how they treated it was you grab a cat and toss it onto the back of the animal, and the cat would land claws down, and then nail the tusse, which would be riding the sick animal. And cats also were believed to see the unseen. So the cat would nail whatever it was that was afflicting the animal. So they didn't know about bacteria or viruses. Also hanging a bell around an animal's neck. And we
Sorry,
see this.
Armin, I'm just trying to imagine throwing my cat on a pig and seeing how that works out.
I don't think it would end well. And certainly like with our cats, like Betty, who has murder claws, it would kill anything that it landed on.
Well, pigs have pretty thick skin.
Well, pigs are also pretty fast and cranky and smart. And I've seen one of our pigs catching a slow chicken that was trying to go in their trough and eat it. So if the cat wasn't out of there pretty fast, the pig might dine on cat.
Yeah.
Not if it was a Norwegian forest cat, boy.
Yeah, but if a cat, excuse me,
Yes.
I love farmers market lemonade.
Mm.
But tossing a cat claws down that would see the target, and the cat would bail because it would take the pig or whatever a little bit of time, a fraction of a second to react, and the cat could bail out really quickly and head away. But the bell, when you see bells on animals, sheep and cows, horse harnesses very frequently had jingly things on them.
Mm-hmm.
And those were protective amulets, as it were. Another treatment, this was documented in 1932, was to shoot a rifle which had hung in a cottage in which a corpse had been laid out. Shoot that over the animal. Of course, catching the animal afterwards would be a challenge. Now, but bells on the necks of animals, this goes way back, and we see this in many cultures, not just the Norse. Then how many people have belled the cat?
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of wondering about that implies that you have a special hut for laying out the dead.
With a gun in
Or
it?
if somebody died in the house, then that would be where the person died, and they're not necessarily there right now, but in which the rifle that had been hanging in that house where somebody died, there's a lot of death magic.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be sort of sympathetic magic. There was, because the bullet would theoretically kill whatever it was that was affecting the animal. No, this spell here comes from 1864.
I'm sorry,
The
Armin,
evil
I'm
eye.
sorry. Before you move on, You were also talking about bells.
Yeah.
Can you talk about bells a little bit more? Because I'm sitting next to Santa Claus here, and we have bells on the reindeers and various other critters in his menagerie. So I'm curious if there's any magic associated with that.
Definitely. The bells or the jingle bells, which you see on animals, would scare away evil spirits. And you will also see like sort of hook things, like on draft horses, you'll see jingly things there. But yes, definitely on the reindeer, this was what it was, to avert anything evil or something that might attack. Hi there, Star Wolf. No, it's not Star Wolf. It's Star Wolf's over there. Huh. But I've been
We'll
enjoying
go-
the bee. I've been enjoying the bees.
So I just wanted to add in the notion of the bell keeping out evil spirits is part of the reason why bells are a part of the Catholic cleansing rituals. You know,
Yeah,
that goes all the way back.
and the church
we
bells.
have-
Yeah.
And we have experience with bells chasing away evil spirits out of the context of curing any animals, because Feather Stitch dug this up, and we made this thing to hang on our door with lots of jingle bells. So every time the door was open, they would ring. I think it was meant to chase our landlord away, but
Anything evil that wants to come in when you open the door.
right. So we had that there, and it suddenly fits in. And we were
So
always
that's not just to announce that the storekeeper has a visitor. That's to keep evil out too.
yeah,
Well, that too, but it alerts the storekeeper. There is something coming in here. Do I want to deal with that? Well, some landlords might be evil. They're typical.
this one is.
But
No doubt about it. I'm not
But-
going to waste time here, but yeah.
anyway, so yeah, bells. I much prefer bells and singing bowls and things like that to smudging.
Mm,
We have people who are asthmatic and allergic, and I think bells as a way of clearing the energy is a far superior system.
yeah, sound can be extremely powerful, because I have both a chime, a singing bowl, and some bells. I also have my homemade sage extract, which I use, but I don't smudge with combustion anymore.
Yeah, in Norway, for smudging, you would use buried juniper, not sage. And
Mhm.
that was used, actually, that turned out to be antibacterial, because the places where they had people that had tuberculosis, they would have them housed in a specific place, and they'd smudge with the juniper. And to this day, in one of the folk museums, there's one of these sanitaria, and on a humid day, you can still smell the juniper in the wall. But juniper is
Ooh.
very antibacterial. They were very conscious of the herbs and the things that they didn't know about bacteria, but they knew that this worked. So,
Yeah, back to 1864.
what?
I said back to 1864.
Yeah. Okay, this one here is another thing that you were worried about with your animals was the evil eye. And so here, you should note well of your nearest neighbors, those who have sent the evil eye unto my animals. God give turning, God send them away. I shall send them through 9 still waters. I shall send them through 10 turbulent waters. I shall send them over gallows and gates. I shall send them down into the blue mountain where neither sun nor moon shines. Now the blue mountain, there was Berge de Blå. That was where theoretically witches went for their sabbats with the Christian devil, but it was a mysterious place, and this, in other words, really sending the evil eye away. Now, if a person knew that they had the evil eye, they would never look anybody in the eyes. They would never look at an animal. They would have their heads downcast or off to the side, because some people realize that, oh my God, I do have the evil eye. And so you would try to identify evil eye, and there were, various things you could do. Of course, bells also, the jingling would also tend to avert. Now, animals sometimes would go off their feed. Now, this goes for the whole bunch of them. It was called klumsebeten, and so sometimes it was believed that if an animal went off its feed, it was affected magically. Could have been via the evil eye or whatever. And so what a person would do, the person who owned the animal would do, and a lot of Norse magic was done in complete silence. So the person would tie a cloth around their head so they could barely see, and you had your nose barely free, and you go from their farm to the nearest farm, where without speaking a word, take a little food which is given by the resident. Now, this would be arranged ahead of time so the resident there would know, and it could be flour, it could be something, a pancake, or God knows what. And so then this would be given to the animal in hopes that it would regain its appetite. And this is similar to nikul namat, or 9-woman food, where 9 women from adjoining farms would go from one farm to another, and with their backs to the open door, because this is all arranged ahead of time, put a bowl or something behind them, and either take in, they'd collect some food, or sometimes it would be given food, and the collected food would be blended and given to the animal. And nikul namat, or 9-woman food, was also given to women in childbirth. This was a protected community thing. So when you're doing this, you do not speak a word. You just simply sit down, and usually on the threshold facing out with your hands behind you. And then whatever is put in your hands would go into the bowl, and then that would be blended with, if you did 1, or if you did 3, or if you did 9. Usually it was multiples of 3 farms. Well, it depends, because some of the farms were fairly far apart. You took a little bit of walking. And so this would be to deal with going off the feed that would be magically induced. Next up is constipation. Critters get it too. It's called troldro, and if they're bloated and they're just rolling around, one treatment was to take a shoe or boot which had been smeared with tar or fat on a holy day. Remember, you're using this, in a way, this is quite using Christian magic, as it were, but you're using it on a holy day, and burned to ashes, and then those ashes given to the animal mixed with porridge, hay, or other food in order to get the animal's digestion going again. But the ash would probably be, that might get things going. If one could get the animal to eat the charred coals without anything mixed in it, that would be best. But, animals are not going to necessarily lap up a burnt boot.
Yeah, but charcoal is very purifying.
Oh, yeah. Highly absorbent.
Now, for cattle, we're going to start on cattle. most bovine problems is mastitis, where you've got inflammation of the udder. Now, the udder has 4 quarters with a nipple on each side. And you can, you'd have to treat that. You know, if you put your hand up against the udder, it'll be very warm as opposed to sort of more room temperature, but the unusual heat. So you'd have to keep on stroking it and milking out the pus. And you just have to keep on going and going and going. You know, that was a practical thing rather than a magical thing. Now, most of the veterinary treatments for cattle were magical in nature. Oh, well, because they didn't know about a lot of stuff, but they did use herbs. In Sweden, they used ground ivy, which is called korsnap, and in bitter nightshade, which is vivang, given to cows together with meserion, which is called tisbat, or leopard marsh orchard, mariahon, or hugvendel. Hugvendel means turning away something. So you'd have various herbs that would be used, whether or not they actually worked with something else, but okay. But it was believed that the Hulda folk could not tolerate those herbs. And so you could smudge the animals with that or feed those herbs to the animal, and that would chase away the supernaturals that were causing the ailment. And sometimes, you know, if you had a big bonfire, you could walk the cattle through the smoke. And you see this in Celtic traditions also. Now, other things that was shunned by supernatural beings was valerian and see now, trollgras, which is Paris quadrifolia, or herb Paris. Administer, you can eat raw or take it as drops against throat boils. And cows and horses could get boils in their throats, and so you had to figure out ways to treat them. Sometimes it would be taking a bundle of stuff, having the animal swallow it, and then pulling it back out of the mouth to break the boil. Now, warding off biting animals. Okay. There was something called a warble fly. And that was, what it does is it would put its ovipositor through the skin of the animal and lay its eggs. And so then you start getting gas green. And so you would have, so that you get the healer to come in. And here we have a charm, which would be the practitioner and the animal's owner back and forth. And this is a ritual thing. They all knew what to say. And you had a boring tool, which either looked like a fid, which was a sharp, but usually it had a little cup in the end in which there was pine tar or fir tar. So which is antibacterial actually. And so the practitioner would go and would hold that up against the area of the animal and rotating it against and pushing against the blister would say, egg border, egg border, egg border. I'm drilling, I am drilling, I am drilling. And then the farmer would say, Qua border du for, qua border du for, qua border du for. What are you drilling for? What are you drilling for? Egg border for Scott E. Johnson's coup. I am drilling for the shot in Johnson's cow. Now, it was believed, they didn't realize about the fly, but they realized, they called it shot because they thought it was like a magical shot, like fin shot that would be came from the north and would smack into the animal and cause that, which is why when you had large animals like this, you would put the least valuable to the north, because magic always came from the north. This is why in the old pagan temples, the altar was to the north. And when you had conversion times, you had the pagans idols to the north, and then you had on the east side, you had in the center Jesus, and then on one side Sancta Maria, and then the other side somebody else, usually a local saint or something. So you could go from one to the other. But the Sami, we used to call them laps, but a lap in Norwegian means a tattered piece of cloth, which is a denigratory name for the people. They call themselves Sami. And so, and they were the reindeer herders, and their practitioners, the Nwade, were considered to be unusually powerful. And so magic always flowed from the north in the Norse tradition. As a matter of fact, water from a brook that flowed from the north was very powerful and was used in healing, etc. You could wash animals or babies in water that flowed from the north, and it would be much more powerful. And in conversion times, when they had the preacher, the pulpit was always in the north side of the church, so that the magic could flow over the preacher and down to the people. Okay, are there any questions at this point?
Well, I actually had an interesting thought. I wanted to share a small poem I once read that seems to talk about the overlap between the pagan and Christian traditions, because it comes from the Viking times, and it goes, "A stranger came yestereen. I put food in the eating place, drink in the drinking place, music in the listening place. And he blessed me and my loved ones and my animals. Often, often, often goes the Christ in a stranger's guise. Often, often, often goes the Christ in a stranger's guise." And I rather liked that one. So here was this, this Norse, Viking, whatever, and a stranger comes to his door. So he offers the stranger food and drink and music. And it turns out to be someone who puts great blessings on him for that. But he specifically mentions the Christ in the stranger's guise. I like that image.
Yeah. And yeah, I saw the thing, the helping the Sami when Chernobyl went, yeah. And a lot of the reindeer were affected by the radiation. But I got to keep on moving here. Cow's not thriving. Sometimes a cow won't eat, or drink, or thrive. So what you would do magically was you get a handkerchief that lay across the body of a corpse and strike the cow 3 times over its back with this. Oh, well, if that didn't help, then slaughter the cow and you've got meat. But
Can you
here
buy
with
these?
the dead would theoretically remove what was evil. We see the use of the dead for removing sickness in humans as well as animals.
Can you buy these handkerchiefs at their local drugstore, or I mean, a handkerchief that's laying on the body of a corpse?
Yeah, well, this was magical, and whether it worked or not. But if you smack the cow a couple of times, maybe the cow would go, hey, 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 and start doing something. The dead theoretically removed what ailed the cow. So you could use a shroud, coffin nails, or coffin splinters, and even a hung thief's left thumb and we see a hung thief's left thumb. So if you're lucky enough, we're lucky enough to find a thief that was hanging, and you were able to grab the left thumb, you could use that for many magical things, including, it was said, you could also bore a hole through the thumb, and looking through the hole, you could detect a thief. Oh yeah, anti-theft was a big thing too, but we're talking about critters here. Or you take a psalm book which laid under the head of a corpse. With your hand palm up, stroke the psalm book along the back of the cow. Then it will get healthy again. Remember, this is superstition, and it's interesting, the use of Christian things here. If calves are not thriving, have them eat out of the holy chalice. You say, you got to sneak into the church, grab the chalice, put something in it, and get the calf to eat out of it. And that was theoretically would take away the problem. This is interesting, the blend of pagan and Christian. Sneak into the church on a Thursday, Thor's Day, and scrape some of the clay from the church wall and give that to the calf in its drink. And then that would cure the calf. But then also there was scraping from the inside of a church bell. And those scrapings also were used for medicine, as it were, for man and beast. A lot of the things that were done were for man and beast. Herbs that were used for treating lack of milk, and this would be for cattle as well as goats, would be alder, and also sticky catchfly, which is Viscaria viscosa. And so you'd have drenches that were, shot down the mouth of the animal. Also birch sap, because birch in the springtime, if you've ever snipped off a birch branch and you can just suck on, just get the sap right out of it. Birch is very generous with its sap. Or also what they would do, pour lactation, is to pour a little milk on the threshold of the buyer, and then chop with an axe many times lengthwise and crosswise on it. And then at the end, strike the threshold with an axe hammer so powerfully that it shatters and strikes the wall, so that the threshold would shatter. So this is trying to get that. This one here is from 1830, from a strength stolen cow, from Gudbrandsdal. The cow stood in the path. Again, this is Christian overlaid on pagan, and it's amazing how powerful the Virgin Mary was, because she was essentially the healer. The cow stood in the pasture and wept bitterly. The Virgin Mary came walking by. Why are you crying so bitterly? I may well weep. I am strength stolen, the marrow from my horns, the meat from under my hide, the strength from my body, the freshening of my udder. The milk from my spigots. The Virgin Mary sat on the earth-fast stone and said, I will heal you myself with my 10 holy fingers and 12 of God's angels. You shall get marrow in your horns. You shall get meat under your hide. You shall get marrow in your bones. You shall get freshening of your udder. You shall have milk in your spigots, and that and the 3 names of God, which would be Good Father, Good Son, O Holy Ond. Now, there were milk stealers, and there's a whole body of literature on this that would be not only supernatural beings, but also humans that could theoretically telekinesis, by telekinesis, either take the milk out of the udder, or if you had the cream in a churn, And so you'd pour that, and so you'd be churning away. And if the butter did not come, what you did in pagan times, you had a bed crystal, which is like a quartz crystal, and you'd put that in the bottom in a little hole and fasten it down with pine tar or something like that. So it glue it down so that the milk stealer would go in and they have an ooh moment. And while they were looking at the crystal, then you could continue churning and maybe get butter. But a much better and more effective thing was you'd be churning away and nothing was coming. So you have a poker in your hearth fire. And so you just be churning away, and then you just take the dasher out, and you take this hot poker and you plunge it down, and the milk stealer would grab for the butter and would burn the hands on the poker. But what that did actually was heat the cream. Now, cream that is cold does not really form butter easily. However, if it's like room temperature warmer, you can get butter pretty quickly. So this was a practical way. And in Christian times, they also, each time they churned, they'd put a little cross. They'd carve a cross on the outside of the churn to protect it, because milk stealing. Now, sometimes a cow would milk blood, if and so blood would come. And so it was said that if the cow walked over the nest of a yellowhammer, which is called goosebird, which is a bird, that it have blood in its milk. The birds have shaped nests on the ground, but they didn't know why a cow would milk, but it believed also that in some places that it was an under earth being that had nursed at the cow's teats. So you'd have to burn a match under each one of the teats at the same time. And so the heat coming up would chase away the magic. Or you would milk the cow, that spigot, through an inherited ring or a golden ring or a silver brooch. And so it would be a circle and going through. And we see, looking through a circle or a ring, we see this all over the place in Norse and Sami. Some of this stuff comes from the Sami. Now, cows can be real clumsy. And so you can get wrenched legs. And so you try to keep the cow in a stall, but what you do is the magical treatment would be where the foot was put down, you'd cut around the turf there, and then you'd put that up on a pole, and theoretically would heal the leg, right? Sharp objects in a cow's rumen. Yeah, cows will eat all sorts of stuff, and sometimes, like nails or whatever would wind up. Now, it'll wind up in the first of the cow's 4 stomachs. And so sometimes it will, as the thing churns, the thing will go through the thing and just slat around inside the cow's body. But knoll or nail is what you'd call. And so much more practical and much more recent than Viking times would be to cut a small slit in the side of the cow, get your hand in, feel around on the rumen, and if you can find out where the sharp thing was, is to grab it. And from Joe Link's Goodreads, okay. And so you could pull it through the rumen, and the cow will heal pretty well. And particularly if you stroke some comfrey on it. Comfrey is nature's crazy glue. Twisted uterus. this happens with horses and cows. And so what you do is you'd have to have the animal, you could try to put your hand up, twisted uterus, for when you're calving. Sometimes when it's calving and it's twisted and the calf can't come in, but you'd have to try to roll the animal over and try to untwist things. So this was a physical thing. And we see this also in, what was it? All Creatures Great and Small, the Harriet books.
Yeah.
So it goes there. If an uterus is extracted and hangs out the back end of the animal, you have to wash it down, clean it off, and try pushing it back up, and the cow will resist. So you put the back end of the cow up on something and try to push this down and get it pushed in so that it is extended in its normal position. If a cow cannot rise to its feet, frequently this is after giving birth. And like today, what one does, and as a matter of fact, as you see this also in All Things Great and Small, the Harriet books, would be a calcium injection into a neck vein. But back then they didn't know about that. So they would try to, get the cow. If it lived, it lived. If it died, oh well. And you try to support it. You try to get it onto its feet. But if it didn't work, then the cow would probably die. They didn't have the veterinary medicine that we have today. I got to keep going.
Well,
So
they
much
can always buy the book.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, this is the book, The Way of the Wise, and Chipicon is my cover artist,
Hmm.
and that's available on Amazon.
Joe has put up the link for you.
Yeah, and it's got a big section on human stuff, huge herbal section, and also Norwegian to English, English to Norwegian, etc., etc. Anyway, restlessness. Sometimes animals are really restless, and sometimes you'd find out they were lathered up. Well, maybe they'd been grabbed up for the wild hunt. Whoa. You didn't want, so what you do to protect the animals, you'd have them, if those storms, usually in November, are coming through, try to keep the animals in the barn, and you would have a scythe or sickles above the door. Remember the old days also putting horseshoes up, but it was cold iron. And so they said they were in this, it was very powerful magic, as it were. But, gunpowder, sulfur, and fire also used to chase off supernaturals. You could shoot a bullet over a cow or burn gunpowder under a cow's belly or on top of its back to make the invisible miscreants scamper away in haste. Then you get to calm the cow down, if you can catch the cow.
I'll tie the cow first.
What?
Tie the cow to the post
Yeah.
first and then shoot over it.
And shot was, I mentioned that earlier, sent as a magical missile, usually sent from the north, possibly by the Sami. And the gun, you see this in Norwegian as well as in Sami. And that was a very powerful type of magic. We're still on prose, damn it. Anthrax and sudden onset diseases. Ooh, I've got to keep cracking. Bro, which is bloating in cows, horses, and sheep. And that could be from a poison, infection, or curse on the animal, or bad food. And anthrax is called miltbrand, and that was malignant, contagious, and deadly and quick running. And sometimes you'd have a bloody discharge from the nostrils and nose, and also anus, falling to the ground and dying. And so that you just, the best thing you would want to do so that you would be to burn that, shove the body into a ditch and burn it, because anthrax is very contagious to humans as well. You didn't want to eat the meat. And then if you have a number of things where Jesus or Mary would strike the animal on the mouth and say, "You are healed." That didn't necessarily work. Horses. Let's get on horses. Horses, usually what has the biggest problem there would be wrenched or broken legs, or shot, or the warble fly, or throat boils. And they're also very easily spooked, and try to catch a spooked horse. Okay, this is okay to recite. So the healer would have like a bowl or container, and you put salt and flour in it, and they would mutter the spell into that, and very, very quietly. And the owner of the animal was not supposed to hear what was going on, because this was magic. And so one of the spells that would be recited was, Jesus rode to Head. That was the local place where the animal was. There it went ill with his horse's leg. Jesus dismounted and healed it. Jesus laid marrow to marrow. Jesus laid bone to bone. Jesus laid meat to meat. Jesus laid thereon a leaf, that it would become whole in the same spot. In 3 names, Good Father, Good Son, O Helion. And so it could be a horse or a donkey or other animal who had a wrenched or broken leg or whatever. But if it's a broken leg, you can try splitting it, but you may wind up having a horse meat dinner. Laminitis, that on a horse's hoof is like a sort of an infection, and any smith that does farrier work would know. And so what they'd have to do is scoop out the infected tissue in the hoof. But it was said for the magical treatment was, take a black woolen rag and put a young girl's first moon time or menstrual blood on this cloth, and stroke the horse gently overall during the morning. And when you have made the horse clean, it will do better. There was a lot with the first blood of a girl becoming a woman, and also the first semen from a boy becoming a man. You find that in a lot of the interesting magic. Eye problems, you'd put a human louse in his ear on the same side as the sick eye, and then the horse theoretically would recover. No, I'd wash the eye out and probably put in an extract of white willow bark, which is like aspirin, salix alba, and or some other. There's plenty of herbs that you could do a wash. You could do a lot of washes. Throat boils, and these came from, or called quercil, and it shows up as a catarrh in the nasal mucosa with discharge from the nose. And pus can be carried further to inner organs, which can cause death. So they're caused by a bacterium, Streptococcus equi. And they can also be caused by tuberculosis. Yes, horses can get tuberculosis. Again, you have these epic, from the bones to the meat, to the pains of hell, etc., etc. spells. Followed by God, Good Father, Son, or Helion. Spooked horses, you would enchant, there's a big enchantment, but try to control a spooked horse. Actually, one of the best things is to blindfold the horse and try to lead it around slowly. But there's a big spell in the 1780s for a spooked horse. Cross in the name of God the Father, cross in the name of God's Son, cross in the name of the Holy Spirit. Of course, you're doing these things. I enchant from you, and you name the animal or person. Inner fears and outer fears. I enchant from you, name the person or animal. Devil, caster, and evil devil spirit. I enchant from you, name the person or animal. Fear of water. I enchant from you, name the person or animal. Fear of grass. I enchant from you, name the person or animal. Earth fears. See, they're very legalistic. They try to get everything sewed up. I enchant from you, fear of men. I enchant from you, fear of women. I enchant from you, out of my horse now with the hand of Reuben. Now of St. John's bindings to fare down and north to the regions of hell. Amen, amen, amen. So you can really, but while you're mumbling all of this and, trying to calm the horse down, maybe it would work. Now, we have just a few minutes left. Sheep. Again, you share the sheep in the spring. And if they start limping, again, lead it out on the field and then cut around where the foot came down and put that piece of turf up off the ground and over the byre door. Or you lead the sheep to a cross church road, which is a crossroad which has a church on one corner, and dig up the turf upon which the sheep stood and take it home and hang it on the chimney. When the turf dries, the sheep will get better. Right. And there's just all sorts of interesting things. If a sheep has grass illness, whatever that is, grassot, clip a piece out of its ear so that it bleeds, and then the blood is put into the animal's mouth for the cure. Right. And was sometimes used for pigs and other domestic animals, a kind of bleeding to get rid of the bad blood. Goats. Some of you have had goats.
I have.
Yeah. When a goat or buck gets ill and then suddenly dies and runs around in a circle, take the head of a rabbit, but not with the bare hands, put it in water, and then take that water and wash this ailing animal with widdershins on the head. That helps, theoretically. Yeah, but I could just see a goat standing for that. And it was, in another area, it says, for constipation in goats, recite Our Father 3 times backward, beginning with Amen. And I can just see trying to remember that. I can think of other ways to deal with constipation in goats. Pigs, again, it was the going around and getting the food from the various places in silence and giving it to the pig to eat, usually porridge. If the animal died, oh well, you'd had smoked meat, dried meat, roast meat, whatever. So you did the best you could, but you see, you didn't have the modern veterinary things. Okay, what do we have for questions and comments?
Let's see.
Well, I think you've kind of like said everything.
Yeah,
And the stampede of information is
that's
kind
funny.
of run us all over. So I'm just sitting here a little shell shocked from it all.
Yeah, well, it's not modern medicine.
Well,
There was a lot.
no. And certainly medicine has had deep roots with the use of magic and herbs and all sorts of things.
I'm just imagining a culture where the prepubescent boys and girls are waited upon to have their first emissions, and it's not a thing of shame, but a thing of like, oh, it's going to be something really valuable. Come on, we're going to celebrate it. We're gonna store it up for future medicine usage. It just like,
Oh, yeah.
what does it have? Like, it just has just such a different.
Your voice is sort of doing
It's
funny
not
things
shame
on your.
about it.
Yeah, there's no shame. This was, it was a coming of age was a big thing.
Yeah,
And so this would be a celebration rather than shame. And the local healer would be very interested in gathering emissions. And now they didn't have Tampax back in the old days. They certainly didn't have, as we called it, mouse mattresses. But what you did was you had linen cloth, and you could put like combings
mouse.
from flax or
Mouse mattress.
or reindeer moss or something like that. They'll be shaken out and then the cloth washed.
Mouse mattresses. Okay, that's gonna hurt my brain for a while.
That's
Well,
what we called them.
I'm
Yeah,
thinking
well-
about you got your healer is going to be keeping an eye on the kids as they're getting a little bit older, because a lot of this stuff, you'd have a chance to do it. There's an Anglo-Saxon charm that consists of, there's a certain type of, I think, stag beetle, and the Anglo-Saxon sorcerer would, if he found one, he'd scoop it up in his hands and shake it like crazy, and then turn it loose, and you can see this poor, like, dizzy
Bewildered.
beetle wandering off and wondering what the hell. But that would give his hands the magical thing. He could then put them on somebody's stomach and take care of a stomach ache for a year, and then he'd have to try and find another one of these poor bugs. But it was opportunistic. You had to get your Thor's Thunderwater on Thursdays. You had to get your things. And I'm thinking that maybe they didn't have to sneak into the church unless that's part of the Norse magic, because in Saxon times, the priests had a lovely business on the side selling. You if you needed to have a mass said over something, you would put it under the altar, and you would pay the priest to enchant the things that you put under the altar, and then you'd take them away, and they'd sew sacred soap and sacred wax and sacred whatever.
They didn't have much of that in Norway, but it was sneaking in at midnight. And also, if you carved the lead from the stained glass window from the north side, then you would use that in the diagnostic. Here, like in the cover of the book, you'd have the lead, you'd melt that, and it'd be poured through a flatbed and a bowl with north flowing water on the patient's belly for diagnosis. Of course, the healer would probably have a good idea what was going on. But yeah, you snuck into the church a lot. And there was like passing sick babies through the priest's vestments that would be laid out, and passing them through that to get rid of sickness.
Without the
So there's a
priest
lot.
knowing?
Oh, the churches were very active. As soon as the priest was at home, they'd check that he was home. Then all sorts of action would be going on. But remember, Norway was a lot farther away from Christendom, as it were, than actually Anglo-Saxon England, which was a lot closer by sea routes. You were just across the bay from France.
Yeah. So, but I think it's an attitude difference too.
Yeah,
There was a big grief when the when the Danes and the various Scandinavians moved into England, and they got Christianized, but they didn't understand the way the first generation monotheists never get the concept of monotheism. If you've been a polytheist, monotheism just doesn't make sense. And the transitions were funny.
yeah. And the Anglo-Saxon men were pissed as hell because the Norsemen washed and combed their hair and changed their clothes, and they bathed, and the girls would all go to the Norsemen and hygiene.
How
Anyway,
dare they?
how dare they? Yeah, well, we have we're going to be I have to get off now. I'm going to stop the recording, and after I remind everybody, tell your friends, because you don't want your friends to be cross with you when they find out about this wonderful conference. If you didn't tell them, they'll say, why didn't you tell me? I would have gone to that. So you got to tell your friends about it. Tell them about Otherworldly too. And
That's the
thank
first
you,
weekend in
Jane.
November.
Yes, thank you,
Thank you
Jane,
so much, Auntie
very much.
Arlen.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
It was
awesome.
lovely.
Well, critters are important.